Hi, I'm Emily Bailey from Towson University in Maryland. This project is about Ellen Swallow Richards, who was a pioneer of the home economics movement, a scientist, and an advocate for reforming domestic environments in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and considers the intersections of her work with Christian reformers like the Beecher sisters and John Harvey Kellogg. 19th century trained physicians and health reformers claimed that their methods were against the folklore and quackery of previous generations practicing folk medicine. Yet in the early decades of the century, approaches to health and medicine included lingering strains of so-called heroic medicine, in which large quantities of blood were let and drugs administered that had violent side effects that were sometimes debilitating, if not lethal. The squalid state and population density of many American cities created environments ripe for outbreaks of diseases like cholera, scarlet fever, and typhus. Compounding the problem, American physicians at the time had little to no formal education, learning their trade through observations and apprenticeships. In 1800, there were only 4 medical schools in the U.S. at the University of Pennsylvania, King's College, now Columbia University, Harvard College, and Dartmouth College, a number that slowly increased to 40 by 1840. Concerns about getting sick or staying well were therefore undoubtedly at the forefront of the myriad movements that developed as the century progressed. Addressing the conditions of one's health and environment, whether through the lenses of water, food, domestic life, or scientific advancement, social and religious reformers sought systematic means for controlling well-being. These reformers, like Ellen Swallow Richards, John Harvey Kellogg, and Catherine Beecher, worked to create a sense of order, sometimes explicitly religious, other times not. Born in 1842, Ellen Swallow Richards, perhaps less popularly known than the other aforementioned reformers, was instrumental in environmental sanitation, home economics, food policy, and women's education. A chemist and sanitation engineer with degrees from Vassar and MIT, Richards was a pioneer in more ways than one. Following her graduation from MIT, she first volunteered to teach in the women's laboratory there, where school teachers could study science and how to demonstrate it, bringing it back to their classrooms. She then taught chemistry at the Lawrence Experiment Station in Massachusetts, where she worked until her death. While there, Richards contributed to a prototype for water sanitation and sewage treatment, an important advancement in an era when a plethora of waterborne illnesses made disease imminent and its spread rampant. While these contributions are noteworthy, it was Richards' development of Euthenics that truly set her apart from her contemporaries, as she intensively advocated for a new science of controlled environment. Marrying science, sanitation, and domestic life, her 1910 book on the subject called for the betterment of living conditions through conscious endeavor for the purpose of securing efficient human beings. Richards argued that the perfect environment was one developed through sanitary science and education, that related to real-life practices and experiences, and that was in need of cultivation, but well worth the effort. The result was a science of taking care of things. Richards expanded on these ideals in 2 domestic texts, her 1882 Chemistry of Cooking and Cleaning, and her 1885 Food Materials and Their Adulterations. Both about the benefits of home sanitation, Richards argued for the crucial role of women in maintaining the well-being and efficiency of the members of their households, thus keeping their communities and societies well and efficient too. While individuals were important, euthenics was a communal act, a moral force to be strengthened by spreading the lesson that one cannot live to oneself alone, but that one's acts or failure to act affect a large number of one's fellow men. In Richards' words, preventing illness was a new crusade, requiring faith, hope, and courage, but also, more practically, a way to save costs and a way to save lives. It was the duty of the rich and the salvation of the poor. Richards echoed the lingering strains of Republican motherhood in her time, contending that the art of maintaining a household hinged on caring for and cultivating the morals and ideals of the next generation of Americans. A child's home environment was a potent factor in his future efficiency. Modeling efficiency, cleanliness, and wellness for one's children would therefore help to ensure that they too understood the importance of being mindful about the details of the environment in the broadest sense. While the idea of the domestic shifted in Richard's lifetime to include understandings of one's nation, individual homes were still at the forefront of women's work and consideration. Richards and contemporary Catherine Beecher had interesting approaches to the importance of women's work in the home as a means for domestic as well as national well-being. Particularly after the tumult of the American Civil War, the home, in principle and architecture, was to be a place where Americans could find respite from the corruption of the outside world and a kind of moral sanctuary, which could in turn reflect back into the imperfect world as a salvational beacon. As Catherine and her sister Harriet Beecher Stowe proposed in their 1869 American Woman's Home, the home environment was to be a place where Christian families were trained in preparation for their eternal home, guided by wives and mothers who engaged in a unique sort of domestic ministry. Women's work was celebrated, supported sometimes by education, but always significant, in a unique feminist view that had domesticity at its core. In a tangible application of Christian ideals, the Beecher sisters proposed the construction of homes that could act as small churches, schoolhouses, as well as comfortable family buildings. The interior environment of home should reflect the Christian worldview of its occupants. Offering artistic renderings of what such a physical space could look like, the Beechers suggested that the first story of a home be designed to include a pulpit-like space around which the family could gather and worship, alongside more traditional living spaces. The presence of physical reminders of faith, like Bibles and crosses, would also serve the purpose of reminding inhabitants of their religious obligations. From this view, the orderliness of the home environment was unquestionably religious. From this perspective, as in Richard's, a well-run home shaped healthy, moral, productive citizens who would in turn create a healthy, moral, and productive society. Although Beecher's 1841 treatise on domestic economy, written the year before Richards was born, was instrumental in shaping how womanhood and domestic work were viewed well into Ellen's own time, Richards took a different approach. As she notes in her 1885 Food Materials and Their Adulterations, household economies had shifted to make goods like food, fabric, and other household items products to be purchased, rather than created by women, as they had been in the past. While Richards did not advocate for returning to the old way of doing things, this concerned her, and she believed that her female middle-class audience was tending toward what she viewed as being a false sense of consumerist comfort. Framing the advances of the day with her Euthenics agenda, Richards stressed that the modernization of the home could advance the home environment so that it could be controlled and consequently the quality of life improved rather than making inhabitants comfortable to the point of complacency. Tapping into other reforms of her time, Richards added the unique layer of dietary wellness to her emphasis on efficiency, purity, and cleanliness for creating the ideal environment. Though dense with data and calculations to support her claims, her writings were couched within broader scientific contexts so as to be accessible to the everyday reader. Her work was geared toward what she called the house engineer, who had practical concerns like how the everyday act of eating could support their family and community. The prosperity of a nation depended upon the health and morals of its citizens, and the health and morals of a people depended mainly upon the food they ate and the homes they lived in. Good-tempered, temperate, highly moral people could not be expected when badly cooked food was fueling them. Food, then, played a supporting role in bolstering ideals while also helping to control environment. That which one ate was to be wholesome and clean, free from disease, bacteria, dust, decay, germs, and toxins. The eating of it should be temperate, for overeating was the same in Richard's estimation as throwing food away. Whether one lived on a farm or in the city, the health and morals of people depended upon the food they ate and the homes they lived in. This, too, aligned with the Beecher sisters' view of food as a key component of the domestic economy. Foods prepared in a well-organized Christian family kitchen were to be well-planned, nourishing, and unstimulating, whether cooked by the lady of the house or her domestic help. Though Richards frequently cites morality, ethics, and divine will in her writings, her focus on the science of environment is what I would call non-denominational. She's on a crusade of sorts, evangelizing for changes in American perceptions of home and community, but her emphasis remains on practical sanitation and purity. The religious reformers sometimes reacted against modern medicine with more holistic approaches to wellness. They also embraced some scientific advancements of the day. For instance, at the same time that serving plates and utensils became more common in the home to spread less germs, Protestant churches began to use individual cups and portioned pieces of bread in communion services to reduce the spread of illness among congregants. This was in part thanks to Richard's home economics efforts that fed into the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. Another point of contact can be found in the work of Seventh-day Adventist John Harvey Kellogg, whose medical practice at the Battle Creek Sanitarium in Michigan overlapped with many points in Richard's agenda for euthenics. Kellogg, however, had a much stronger religious impetus for his work of several decades as the medical director of a large religiously founded scientific institution. It is important at this juncture to also note that Kellogg was a proponent of both Richard's brand of euthenics as well as the more problematic practice of eugenics, which had become popular in some 19th century circles. These terms are sometimes confused, but mean vastly different things. For Richards, euthenics was a science of controlling environment through perfecting space and action, not race or breeding. By most accounts, she was appalled by the implications of eugenics and worked to disassociate her science from it. By the time that her Euthenics, the Science of Controllable Environment, was published in 1910, Richards had outlined her views about the differences between euthenics and eugenics and presented them in the foreword to her book. She wrote, "Eugenics deals with race improvement through heredity. Euthenics deals with race improvement through environment. Eugenics must await careful investigation. Euthenics has immediate opportunity. Euthenics precedes eugenics, developing better men now and thus inevitably creating a better race of men in the future. Euthenics is the term proposed for the preliminary science on which eugenics must be based." The struggle between nature and nurture was a complex one. Kellogg, however, saw much stronger connections between euthenics and eugenics, which he outlined in an essay in 1914 about striving for new views of the human race. No stranger to eugenics, Kellogg's involvement in the construction of a eugenics registry and co-founding in 1906 of the Kellogg Race Betterment Foundation, which controlled the Battle Creek Food Company, reveals a much darker side to the work being done at the sanitarium. Still focused on human ecology, his quest for biologic living suggests that reformers were not merely interested in food and environment, but also sometimes heredity. Kellogg paralleled Richards, however, in his appreciation for a sanitary environment in which wellness could occur. With the latest medical advancements of the day available at Battle Creek, the institution founded by Kellogg and Adventist prophet Ellen G. White and family was intentionally called a sanitarium as opposed to a sanatorium. In an effort to emphasize the multifaceted approach to medicine at Battle Creek, the designation of sanitarium, instead of the regular moniker sanatorium, was meant to draw attention to the modern sanitary environment created at the facility. Unlike sanatoriums of the day, which had the reputation for being prison-like places where people with terminal illnesses were sent to linger and die, the Adventist model for sanitariums was one of spa-like places of healing and respite for the ill and for those who wished to preserve their already good health. Like Richard's euthenic ideal, the aim of the sanitarium was to institutionally teach people how to take care of themselves through holistic wellness and scientific advancement, carrying their knowledge back to their homes and communities for social improvement. In an era when science sometimes challenged religious practices as being backward or archaic, Adventist health reforms caught on in the latter half of the 19th century in part because they were treated as being not religious, but accepted revelations from science by many outsiders to the Adventist tradition. For Adventists, the scientific world of medicine was able to seamlessly join with that of religious life, as Prophet Ellen G. White's visions provided the ground on which the two could meet on relatively equal terms. Her proposed reforms were considered by her followers to be direct revelations from God, and with the help of John Harvey Kellogg were neither considered to be solely scientific nor merely religious. From the angle of diet and food for social betterment, White's first vision of health came in 1848, discouraging the use of tobacco, coffee, and tea, and portending bigger reforms to come. Her 45-minute-long vision of comprehensive health reform at a tent meeting in Michigan 15 years later had an even greater influence on the ways in which Adventists like Kellogg approached diet. This lengthy revelation called for an abstemious vegetarian diet in which all meat, tobacco, alcohol, spicy and rich foods were to be eliminated, and which advocated for the benefits of regular exercise and water, both for curative and hydration purposes. While it's not in the scope of this project to further dissect Adventist approaches to diet and wellness, it is significant to note that White and Kellogg's visions for diet were significantly different from Richard's, who called for a simple and temperate diet, but was more interested in economies, health, efficiency, and the chemistry of baking cakes and making palatable cups of tea than avoiding sugar and caffeine for religious purposes. However, like Richard's teachings, White's visions about health and well-being remained popular with the American mainstream because they were in line with the rise of increasingly sophisticated scientific approaches to modern life. Pure diets and the therapeutic potential of sun, fresh air, and water were unparalleled in the minds of reformers, with treatments that mimicked the natural environment when nature wasn't close at hand. Not just concerned with improving the physical body, White wanted to build perfect citizens for the coming kingdom, just like Richard hoped to improve citizens for a better nation. In conclusion, Ellen Swallow Richards, an American pioneer of sanitation and the home economics movement, created a unique brand of far-reaching environmentalism that was in dialogue with and influenced 19th century Christian ideals of social betterment. Advocating for the improvement of environmental conditions within and outside of the home, her work took a fascinating turn when its woman-centered environmental perspectives dovetailed with the ideals of Christian wellness and social betterment. Her emphasis that the opportunity for betterment was real and practical and not merely academic helped seemingly disparate social causes to align with lasting benefits for social betterment in an era of great cultural and religious change.